Good morning. Today we're going to talk about a slightly simplified version of Silent Night. And I think you'll see pretty quickly this one might be a little more manageable than the versions we've looked at recently. The left hand is mostly a series of octaves and smaller chords. There's nothing running in the left hand. And one helpful thing is if you look at the top of each measure, you'll see chords, C, G7, C, F, etc. And those will give you a really good clue as to what you're doing in the left hand. For example, in the first measure, the chord is C. Well, you start out playing a C octave. Okay, so in the first measure, the left hand is C octave, and then you go down to C and G. If you want to further simplify the left hand, you can just play one of those C's to something like that. And the same is true in the second measure. It's that octave. In the third measure, you'll notice the chord is G7. So if you want to think of yourself going into G position, you can go, there's G and B. You can go G and B, up to G and D, and then in the fourth measure you're back to the C chord. Again, you can simplify to something like this if you want to. The second line, F chord, so we're in F position, 5 and 1, then 5 and 3, up to B, and then back to this. The next measure is C. Again, the F chord. We've done this before. Then the C chord. This is the end of the second line. The last line, we start with a G7, so think of yourself in G position. You can just play, for that whole measure, you can just play a G chord, which is G, B, and D. You can just sit on this if you like. The next measure is C. That's what's written. Again, you can just simplify it by either playing a C chord. That's C, E, and G. Or you can just playing C. The second to the last measure starts out in C, and it's playing 5 and 1. Then it's G7, so you've got a G octave. Thumb down 1. This is the 7 of the G7 chord. We'll talk about that sometime in the future. And we finish up with C. If you want to just play a C chord, you can do that. Take a look at the right hand. Again, looking at the chords at the top of each measure, we start with C. So you can think of yourself being in C position if you want to, and your first two notes that you're going to play are E and G. However, we have to get up to this, F and A. So I would put 2 and 4 on E and G, so you can go 2 and 4, 3 and 5, back down, and then play C and E with 1 and 2. Again, that happens again in the second measure. Third measure, yes, it's a G7 chord. That's not going to help you with these notes. What you have is an F on the bottom and a D on the top. Changing to B on the top. Then we go to E and C, and E and G. That's the first line. Now, the beginning of the second line, it says F is the chord, which is perfect for this. We can sit in F position, play 1 and 3, and then 3 and 5, and just step down. Now we're at the C chord again. We've got E and G. I would put 2 and 4 on that E and G, so you can go up to this. That's going to be just like the first measure. Again, this is measure 6 on the second line, which is just like measures 1 and 2. Now, if we continue on the second line, again, it's that F chord. Back to that C chord, just like the first 2 measures. The third line, it says G7. That's not going to help us, so we just look at the notes. F and D, we've done this before. Now we have an F octave, and back to the F and D, and then F and B. And now we have a C chord, which sort of helps us because that top note is C. The bottom note is E. It's a 6th. And here's another 6th, G and E. So you can do this any way you want, any way that works. You can just hop like this, or you can do a fingering like 1 and 4 and 2 and 5 if you want to. Experiment, use whatever works. Second to the last measure, we're back to the E and C. Now we're down to C and E, and you can just sit right there. Now there's a little stretch to B and D, and the final note is the C. All together, here's what it will sound like. Sometimes simple and straightforward is the best. Obviously, this is never fast, so you can take all the time you need. Experiment with how much do you want to simplify, if you want to simplify at all. So get it really confident, hands separate, and then start incorporating them hands together very slowly with pedal, 1 measure at a time. And we will evaluate where you're at next time.